Most people assume fruit trees need a big yard, deep soil, and years of patience before they ever give you a single bite. But that's not quite true. In fact, some fruit trees fruit better in a pot than they ever would in the ground. Smaller, faster, easier to protect, and in some cases more productive per square foot than a full-size tree taking up half your lawn. That's the part the garden centers rarely tell you. If you've got a balcony, a patio, a sunny set of steps, or just a corner of concrete that gets a few hours of light, you can grow real fruit. Lemons you actually pick, figs you actually eat, peaches that ripen on your own little tree in a container you can move with 2 hands. Today, we're counting down 15 high-yield dwarf fruit trees that thrive in containers. We're going from number 15 all the way down to number 1. And stay with me to the end, because the tree sitting at the number 1 spot is the one almost nobody expects. It's a tree that actually produces more fruit because it's stuck in a pot. Its roots being crowded is the secret to its harvest. We'll get there. Before we start, do me one quick favor. Drop your growing zone in the comments, or just tell me which direction your balcony or patio faces, south, north, east, or west. It takes 5 seconds and it tells you more about what you can grow than almost anything else. All right, let's get started. At number 15, we have the dwarf pomegranate. Now, most people picture pomegranates as huge, sprawling trees in some dry Mediterranean orchard. But there's a naturally tiny version called Punica granatum nana, and it stays around 2 to 4 feet tall its entire life. Here's why it loves a container. Pomegranates evolved in hot, rocky, poor soil. They don't want rich ground or constant water. They want sharp drainage and a baking position in full sun. A pot gives them exactly that. The soil heats up faster, drains faster, and that's the stress signal that tells the plant to flower. Give it a pot around 12 to 14 inches across to start. Use a free draining mix, something with a good handful of perlite or coarse sand worked in. Water it deeply, then let the top couple of inches dry out before you water again. That dry spell between drinks is not neglect. It's how you get blooms. The flowers alone are worth it. Bright orange-red trumpets that hummingbirds chase. And in a warm spot, you'll get small, glossy fruit by late summer. But here's the one mistake people make. They feed it too much nitrogen, and they get a big leafy bush with no fruit. Go easy. A pomegranate that's a little hungry is a pomegranate that fruits. And that idea that a little stress can mean more fruit is going to come back again and again on this list. Which leads us to something most people never imagine you can grow in a pot at all. At number 14, the dwarf banana. Yes, a banana. On a balcony, in a container. People assume bananas need a tropical jungle and 20 feet of height, but there's a variety called the super dwarf Cavendish that tops out around 4 to 6 feet, and it's been grown indoors and on patios for decades. Here's the science that makes it work. A banana isn't really a tree at all. It's a giant herb, and that whole trunk is just tightly rolled leaves. Because it grows so fast from a fleshy underground stem, it responds beautifully to a generous pot, rich soil, and steady warmth. There's no slow woody growth to wait on. In one warm season, it can shoot up dramatically. Give it a big pot, at least 16 inches across, because it's a heavy feeder and a thirsty plant. Use rich, moisture-retaining soil with compost mixed in. Keep it in the brightest, warmest spot you have, and water it regularly so it never bone dries. In a cold climate, the trick is simple. When fall comes, you wheel the pot indoors near a bright window, and it rides out the winter as a houseplant. Now, getting actual fruit takes warmth and patience, often a year or more in the right conditions. But even as a leafy living thing on your patio, it brings the tropics home. And the dwarf size means it never gets away from you. Speaking of plants that look exotic but are tougher than they appear, that brings us to number 13. At number 13, the pineapple guava, also called feijoa. Hardly anyone in America grows this, and that's a shame because it might be one of the most forgiving fruit plants you can put in a pot. Most people think tropical tasting fruit needs a frost-free greenhouse. But the pineapple guava shrugs off temperatures down into the teens once established, and it stays naturally compact, perfect for a large container. Here's what makes it special. The fruit tastes like a blend of pineapple, guava, and mint, but you also get to eat the flowers. The petals are sweet, soft, and edible, and pollinators love them, which means the plant often sets fruit with very little help from you. Planted in a pot around 14 to 18 inches wide, in well-draining soil, in full sun, it handles heat, it handles drought once it's settled in, and it has almost no serious pests, which is rare for any fruit. The silver green leaves stay handsome all year, so even out of season, it earns its spot. Give it a sunny corner and a little patience, and by fall you're picking a fruit most of your neighbors have never even tasted. And that brings us to a fruit that's been growing in containers for literally thousands of years. At number 12, the dwarf olive. People hear olive and picture ancient gnarled giants on a Greek hillside. But olives are one of the oldest container plants on Earth, and a variety called arbequina stays small, fruits young, and even produces fruit indoors near a bright window. Why does it do so well in a pot? Because the olive is a survivor. It comes from dry, rocky Mediterranean ground, so it actually prefers a container that drains hard and dries between waterings. Overwatering is the only real way to harm it. Crowded roots and lean soil don't bother it at all, they suit it. Use a gritty, fast-draining mix, a pot around 14 inches to start, and put it in the sunniest, hottest place you've got. Water deeply, then leave it alone until the top few inches are dry. In winter, it actually wants a cool, bright rest. Arbequina is self-fertile, so a single plant can set fruit on its own. And those small olives, cured at home, taste like nothing from a jar. Even if you never harvest a single olive, the silvery foliage and the slow, sculptural shape make it one of the most beautiful living things you can own. Now let's move from the dry Mediterranean to something bright, fragrant, and endlessly productive. We're stepping into citrus, and this is where container growing truly shines. At number 11, the Kalimantan orange. This little citrus is the secret weapon of container growers, and most people walk right past it. Here's the surprise. The Kalimantan is one of the most cold-tolerant and most reliable citrus you can grow, and it produces fruit almost all year long, sometimes flowers and ripe fruit at the same time. The fruit is small, round, and tart, somewhere between a lime and a tangerine. You can squeeze it over fish, stir it into drinks, or make a sharp little marmalade. And the tree is so heavy with fruit it looks like an ornamental display, glossy leaves studded with bright orange globes. In a pot, give it well-draining citrus mix, a container around 12 to 14 inches, and as much sun as you can find. Citrus are hungry, so feed it through the warm months with a fertilizer made for citrus, something with a little extra magnesium and iron. Let the top inch of soil dry before you water again. The big advantage of growing any citrus in a pot is total control. When frost threatens, you simply move it indoors to a sunny window, and it keeps right on going. No greenhouse required. And if you like that idea of a tree covered in tiny jewel-like fruit, the next one takes it even further. At number 10, the kumquat. The kumquat breaks the rule everyone thinks they know about citrus. Most citrus you peel and discard the rind. With a kumquat you eat the whole thing, skin and all, and the skin is the sweet part, while the inside is tart. That alone makes it a delight for anyone with kids or grandkids. They're bite-sized, they're fun, and they grow on one of the toughest, most compact citrus trees there is. Kumquats are slow, dense, and naturally small, which makes them almost custom-built for a container. They're also the most cold-hardy of the common citrus, handling brief cold snaps that would damage a lemon. Use a pot around 12 to 16 inches, fast-draining citrus soil, and a sunny spot. Water consistently, but never let it sit in a saucer of water. Soggy roots are the #1 killer of potted citrus, and it's almost always overwatering, not under. A single dwarf kumquat can give you hundreds of fruit in a good year on a tree you can carry through a doorway. That's the kind of return that makes a few pots feel like a small orchard. Now, before we go further, let me speak to you if you already have an in-ground garden Or if you've been growing for years and you're thinking none of this applies to you, it does. Here's something you can do this very weekend with no special equipment. Take any fruiting plant you struggle to ripen, a fig that won't sweeten, a pepper, a tomato in a slow season, and move it, or its pot, against a south-facing wall. A wall of brick, stone, or even painted siding soaks up the sun all day and radiates that heat back at night. That reflected warmth can add the equivalent of a half zone of climate to that one spot. Gardeners in cool regions have used south-facing walls to ripen tender fruit for centuries. You don't need a container to use it. You just need to notice which wall on your home stays warm after sunset, and put your hungriest for heat plant right against it. That single idea, growing against stored heat, is one of the oldest tricks there is, and it works whether you garden in pots or in the ground. And that single idea that a little stress can mean more fruit is one of the things I go deep on in a resource I want to tell you about right now. If you want the complete system for getting real harvest from containers, I wrote a guide called The Container Harvest that walks you through every step, from soil mixes to variety selection to keeping your trees productive year after year. It's the kind of detail that doesn't fit in a single video, and you can find it linked in the description for $97. If you're serious about turning your patio into something that actually feeds you, it's the place to start. All right? Back to the countdown, and the next one is a fruit tree most people don't even realize comes in a small, well-behaved form. At number 9, the bush cherry. People assume cherries mean a towering tree, a ladder, and netting the whole thing against the birds. But there's a whole class of naturally dwarfed cherries, varieties like Romeo and Juliet, bred specifically to stay around 6 feet and to fruit on a compact shrubby frame. These came largely out of cold climate breeding programs in Canada, developed for hardiness and small size, which is exactly what a container grower wants. They're tart sweet cherries, fantastic for fresh eating, pies and preserves. Here's the part that helps you. Many of these bush cherries are self-fertile, meaning one plant can set fruit without a partner. And they actually need a cold winter to fruit well. So unlike the citrus, these are for folks in cooler zones who thought they couldn't grow much in a pot. Give it a larger container, around 18 inches or more, with good drainage and rich soil. Place it in full sun. In winter, the pot can sit outside in the cold to get the chilling it needs. Just protect the roots from freezing solid by tucking the pot against a wall or wrapping it. A compact cherry you can actually reach on a plant that fits a patio is the kind of thing that makes you wonder why anyone bothers with the giant version. And from a cherry that wants the cold, we move to a fruit that just keeps giving all season long. At number 8, the dwarf mulberry. Mulberries have a reputation as enormous, messy trees that stain everything purple. But there's a dwarf ever-bearing mulberry that stays around 6 feet, can be pruned even smaller, and fruits for months instead of a single short window. That word, ever-bearing, is the magic. Instead of all your fruit ripening in one overwhelming week, a dwarf ever-bearing mulberry hands you sweet berries a little at a time over a long stretch of the warm season. For a container grower, that's perfect. You walk by, you pick a handful, you keep walking. It fruits on new growth, which means pruning doesn't cost you the harvest. You can keep it small and tidy and still get fruit. It's also remarkably easy, fast-growing, drought-tolerant, once established, and largely pest-free. Use a roomy pot, rich soil, full sun, and steady water while the berries are forming. The berries are soft and sweet, almost like a blackberry crossed with honey, and they're a fruit you almost never see in a store because they're too delicate to ship. That's the quiet luxury of growing your own. You get to eat the things money can't easily buy. Now we arrive at a tree that was practically invented for small spaces, and it's one of the most clever shapes in all of fruit growing. At number 7, the columnar apple. Most people think an apple tree needs to spread wide with branches reaching out in every direction. But columnar apples grow straight up like a green pole, with fruit forming tight against a single central trunk. They can stay under 2 feet wide while reaching 6 to 8 feet tall. This shape isn't a gimmick. It comes from a natural mutation discovered decades ago, and breeders developed it into varieties sold under names like Urban and Colonnade. Because they grow upward instead of outward, you can line several along a balcony rail in pots and grow 3 or 4 different apples in the footprint of a single lawn chair. Plant one in a pot around 16 to 18 inches in good rich soil in full sun. Apples need a partner of a different variety nearby for pollination, so plan on at least 2, which the columnar shape makes easy since they take so little room. They need cold winters to fruit, so this is another one for cooler zones. And because the fruit forms close to the trunk on short spurs, harvesting is as simple as reaching out and twisting an apple off at eye level. No ladder, no sprawl, just a slender column of real apples on your patio. And if apples can be tamed into a pot, so can the stone fruits, the peaches and their cousins, which is where this list really starts to surprise people. At number 6, the dwarf apricot. Apricots are usually big early blooming trees that frustrate gardeners because a late frost wipes out the flowers. But the genetic dwarf apricots, varieties like Pixie Cut and Garden Annie, stay around 6 feet, and being in a movable pot solves the frost problem completely. Here's the clever part. The reason apricots fail so often is timing. They bloom early, a spring cold snap kills the flowers, and you get no fruit. But a dwarf apricot in a container can be wheeled into a garage or against a warm wall the night a frost is forecast, then rolled back out the next morning. You're protecting just the blossoms on just the nights that matter. These genetic dwarfs are true small trees, not grafted miniatures, so they stay compact naturally. Many are self-fertile, so a single tree can fruit on its own. Use a large pot, 18 inches or bigger, rich, well-draining soil, and full sun. Feed it through the growing season and keep the water steady while fruit is swelling. A homegrown apricot, picked perfectly soft and warm from the sun, is a completely different thing from the firm, flavorless ones in stores. That ability to move the whole plant out of danger is the quiet superpower of container fruit. And it matters even more for the next one. At number 5, the dwarf nectarine. A nectarine is simply a peach with smooth skin, and the genetic dwarf nectarines, varieties like Nectar Babe and Nectar Z, are some of the most rewarding fruit trees you can fit on a patio. Most people assume a fruit this juicy and delicate must need a full orchard tree, but these natural dwarfs stay around 4 to 6 feet with short distances between their leaves, which gives them a lush, almost bushy look, heavy with fruit. Here's the science behind why a pot helps. Nectarines and peaches are prone to a fungal disease called peach leaf curl, which strikes in cool, wet spring weather as the buds open. In a container, you can pull the tree under an eave or overhang during those rainy spring weeks, keeping the leaves dry and dodging the disease entirely. A full-size orchard tree can't move. Yours can. Give it a large pot, full sun, rich soil, and consistent water once the fruit sets. Then the young fruit, removing some so the rest grow bigger, because a dwarf tree will sometimes try to carry more than it should. The reward is a tree-ripened nectarine, the kind that drips down your wrist, grown in a pot you could move across the patio. And its close cousin, the peach, takes the number 4 spot because of one variety that changed what people thought was possible. At number 4, the genetic dwarf peach, especially the variety Bonanza. When people first see a Bonanza peach, they don't believe it. It's a real peach tree that can fruit at just 2 to 3 feet tall, covered in full-size, sweet, fuzzy peaches. It looks almost like a bonsai that forgot it was supposed to be miniature. The Bonanza was one of the original genetic dwarf peaches, and it proves that you don't need height to get a real harvest. The dwarfing is natural, baked into the tree's genetics, with very short spacing between the leaf buds. That's why it stays so compact while still setting full-size fruit. It's self-fertile, so one tree is all you need. Plant it in a pot around 16 to 18 inches in rich, well-draining soil in the sunniest spot you have. Like the nectarine, you can shelter it from spring rain to dodge leaf curl. and you can move it indoors or against a wall to protect early blossoms from frost. The spring show alone is stunning. The whole little tree smothered in deep pink flowers. Then come the peaches. A 2-foot tree handing you a bowl of real peaches is the kind of thing that makes container growing feel almost like a magic trick. But it's not magic. It's just the right genetics in the right pot. And now we reach the top 3, where the productivity per square foot becomes genuinely remarkable. At number 3, the dwarf blueberry, especially the variety top hat. Now, blueberry is technically a shrub, not a tree, but top hat earns its place because few container plants give you more reward for less space. It stays under 2 feet tall and wide, a tidy little mound that disappears into the corner of a patio, and yet a single healthy plant can give you a steady run of berries. Here's the surprising part, and it's the reason blueberries often do better in pots than in the ground. Blueberries demand acidic soil, a pH down around 4.5 to 5.5, far more acidic than most garden ground. In the open yard, fighting your soil's natural pH is a losing battle. But in a container, you simply fill the pot with acidic mix made for azaleas and rhododendrons, and you've created the perfect home from day one. That's the quiet truth this whole list keeps circling back to. A pot isn't a compromise. Sometimes a pot is the only way to give a plant exactly the conditions it craves. Use that acidic soil, keep it evenly moist, never let it dry out completely, and place it in full sun. Use rainwater if you can, since hard tap water slowly raises the pH over time. Top hat also needs winter cold to fruit, and the fall foliage turns a beautiful fiery red. 1 pot by the door and you're grazing on blueberries all summer. And from a fruit that demands special soil, we move to the single most rewarding container fruit tree most people will ever grow. At number 2, the Meyer lemon. If you grow only 1 fruit tree in a pot in your entire life, it will probably be this one. The Meyer lemon is the tree that converts skeptics, and it has a charm full-size citrus simply doesn't. A Meyer lemon isn't quite a true lemon. It's a natural cross between a lemon and an orange, which makes the fruit sweeter, less harshly sour, with a fragrance that fills a whole room. It was brought to the United States from China in the early 1900s, and the improved disease-free version became one of the most beloved dooryard citrus in the country. In a pot, it's almost theatrical. It blooms with intensely perfumed white flowers, often several times a year, and it can carry flowers and ripening fruit at the same time. A dwarf Meyer can produce dozens of lemons on a tree that fits beside a sunny window. Give it well-draining citrus soil, a pot around 14 to 16 inches, and at least 6 hours of sun. Feed it with citrus fertilizer through the warm months and watch the watering closely. Let the top inch dry, then water deeply until it runs from the bottom. Yellowing leaves usually mean too much water or a hunger for iron and magnesium, both easy to fix. When frost comes, you bring it inside, and that's where the Meyer really earns its keep. It happily lives as a houseplant by a bright window, perfuming the room in the dead of winter while it ripens fruit. A potted lemon tree blooming indoors in January is one of the great quiet pleasures of growing your own. And that brings us, at last, to number 1. The tree I promised you at the very start, the one that produces more, not less, because it's trapped in a pot. At number 1, the fig. Here is the fact that surprises almost everyone. A fig tree planted in the open ground, in rich soil with all the room it wants, will often grow huge and leafy and give you very little fruit. But take that same fig, crowd its roots into a container, and it suddenly turns serious about fruiting. This isn't a wives' tale. It's well-documented horticulture. Figs respond to root restriction. When the roots are confined, the tree stops pouring its energy into endless new wood and instead channels that energy into making fruit. Growers have used this for centuries, deliberately cramping fig roots in pots, in narrow beds, even in buried containers, to force heavier crops. The crowding is the trigger. The pot is doing the work for you. That's why the fig is the perfect container fruit tree and the perfect end to this list. The very thing that limits other plants, a confined root ball, is exactly what a fig wants. Varieties like Petite Negra, Brown Turkey, and Chicago Hardy stay manageable in pots and ripen sweet honeyed fruit. A potted fig can give you 2 crops in a long warm season, an early one on last year's wood and a main crop on the new growth. Here's how to do it right. Use a sturdy pot, around 16 to 18 inches, and don't rush to give it a bigger one. That snug fit is helping you. Use good draining soil. Water deeply and regularly while the figs are swelling, because inconsistent water is the main reason figs drop unripe. Place it in the hottest, sunniest spot you have. Figs love reflected heat off a wall, the very trick we talked about earlier. In cold climates, the fig has one more gift. It drops its leaves and goes fully dormant in winter, which means it doesn't even need light then. You simply move the dormant pot into a cool garage, a shed, or an unheated basement, water it just barely now and then, and bring it back out in spring. A tree that fruits heavily, tastes like candy off the branch, and sleeps quietly in your garage all winter, that's about as close to effortless as fruit growing gets. And the fresh fig itself is a revelation. Most people have only ever had them dried. A ripe fig, warm from the sun, soft and dripping with syrup, is a fruit so delicate it barely survives a trip across the kitchen, let alone a truck across the country. You can only really have that experience if you grow it yourself, which is the whole point. So there's your countdown. 15 high-yield dwarf fruit trees that turn a balcony, a patio, or a sunny corner into something that feeds you. And if you look back across the whole list, there's a single quiet lesson tying it all together. Growing your own fruit was never really about having more land. It isn't about a bigger yard or harder work or more money spent. It's about using the space you have intelligently and choosing plants suited to the life you actually live. A few well-chosen pots, placed in the right light, can outproduce a sprawling, neglected garden every single time. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency. It's walking outside and picking something real, year after year. This kind of growing is for people who'd rather do a small thing well than an overwhelming thing poorly. People who'd rather grow honest food simply in the space they've got than overspend and overwork for it. If that's you, you're in exactly the right place. So here's the one thing I'd love you to do. Tell me down in the comments which direction your balcony or patio faces, south, north, east, or west, and what you most want to grow. Whether it's a Meyer lemon on a windowsill or a fig in a garage, say it out loud in the comments. Don't just think it, write it. I read them, and it helps everyone here learn what really grows in a space like theirs. And if you'd like to keep growing more with less, this is a calm little corner of the internet for exactly that. Stay with us, because next time we're getting into the simple soil mix that keeps potted fruit trees fruiting for years, and the one cheap ingredient most people leave out that makes all the difference. Until then, find your sunniest corner, pick one tree from this list, and start there.